I never thought the words of my own daughter would cut me deeper than any stranger's insult. It happened on a sunny afternoon when I was talking excitedly about taking a short vacation by the coast. I hadn't traveled in years, and I told my family I wanted to go somewhere peaceful, maybe even rent a boat. That's when my daughter, Rachel, laughed in front of everyone and said, "Dad, you're too old for vacations. Who do you think you are? Just sit at home and don't embarrass yourself." The room went silent. My son shifted uncomfortably, my daughter-in-law smirked, and Rachel's husband actually chuckled. My own flesh and blood, telling me I was too old to live my life. I smiled politely, but inside my heart shattered. They saw me as a burden, just an aging man with no purpose. What they didn't know was that I wasn't as powerless as they imagined. They thought I was just living on retirement savings, depending on them for companionship. They didn't know about the letters my lawyer kept for me. They didn't know about the documents hidden in my safe, and they certainly didn't know about the massive inheritance my late brother had left me, including a $15 yacht that nobody but me knew existed. That evening, while they sat in the living room gossiping about how old people shouldn't waste money traveling, I locked myself in my study. I opened the safe, pulled out the envelope with the yacht's deed, and whispered to myself, "Too old for vacations. Let's see what you say when I sail away without you." From that moment, I decided I would no longer beg for respect in my own family. If they thought I was useless, I would show them just how wrong they were. And when the truth came out, they would regret every word they spoke to me, because this wasn't just about a vacation. It was about respect, dignity, and the fact that money reveals people's true colors. And my children, they were about to reveal theirs in the ugliest way possible. I still remember when family dinners used to mean something. Back when my late wife, Margaret, was alive, our table was a place of warmth, laughter, and little arguments over who got the last piece of chicken. My daughter, Rachel, and my son, Daniel, would tease each other, and Margaret would hush them with a smile. But now, that same dining table feels like a battlefield. The chairs are filled, but the warmth is gone. Rachel sits across from me, scrolling endlessly on her phone, barely looking up. Her husband, Victor, a man with a permanent smirk on his face, always makes sly comments that feel more like insults than jokes. Daniel sits next to them, quiet but visibly uneasy, while his wife, Claire, plays the role of a polite listener, though I can tell she's always calculating in her head. And then there's me, the old man at the head of the table. Once the provider, now treated as little more than background noise. "Dad, you should really think about selling this house," Rachel said one evening as she speared a piece of steak. I raised my eyebrows. "And why would I do that?" Rachel sighed as if speaking to a child. "It's too big for you. You don't need all this space. A condo or retirement home would make more sense. Right, Victor?" Victor chuckled. "Yeah, at least then we wouldn't have to worry about you tripping on those stairs. You know, old age and all." The room went silent. Daniel looked at his plate. Claire gave a weak smile, and I forced myself to swallow the sting in my chest. That was how conversations went these days, half suggestion, half insult, and always with the undertone that I was no longer capable of managing my own life. But what they didn't realize was that I wasn't nearly as helpless as they assumed. The following week, I caught Rachel in the study. She was standing by the cabinet where I kept my important documents. She jumped when she heard me. "Oh, Dad, I was just looking for some envelopes," she stammered. I gave her a long look. "Envelopes aren't kept in a locked cabinet, Rachel." She laughed nervously and brushed it off, but I knew better. That cabinet held the deeds to my properties, bank statements, and the envelope from my lawyer, Mr. Harris, the one containing the papers my children had no idea existed. After that day, I began paying more attention. Rachel and Victor always asked questions about my future plans. Claire casually mentioned how expensive nursing homes were. Daniel, to his credit, stayed mostly quiet, but he rarely defended me either. One evening, Victor leaned back in his chair and said, "You know, sir, you should really think about setting your affairs in order. God forbid something happens to you. Better to have things arranged than leave us scrambling." "Is that so?" I asked, my tone sharper than usual. He smiled, all teeth, of course. "It's just practical. Rachel and Daniel could help manage things. Less stress for you. Less stress for me, or more control for them. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking of Margaret. She always told me, watch how people treat you when they think you have nothing to give. That's when you see their true selves. I was starting to see my children's true selves, and it terrified me. I was heading down the hallway when I heard voices coming from the kitchen. I stopped, my heart thudding. Rachel's voice. Dad doesn't even know what he owns. Half of his stuff is just sitting there. If we don't step in, someone else will. Victor's laugh followed. Exactly. The man is old-fashioned. He probably doesn't even realize how much money he's sitting on. Once he signs over some things, we'll have more flexibility. Trust me, this is for the best. And then Daniel's voice, low and hesitant. I don't know, Rachel. It feels wrong. He's still sharp, he's not. You know. Rachel cut him off sharply. Daniel, grow up, we're his kids. Everything will be ours eventually. Why not make it easier now? I froze in the hallway, my hands trembling. So that was their plan, to push me into signing over what was mine while I was still alive. They thought I was blind. They thought I was weak. I backed away before they noticed me, but inside I was seething. My own children were plotting to strip me of everything I'd worked for. I locked myself in my study that night, staring at the safe. Inside lay the truth, the inheritance, the deed, the yacht. They thought I was powerless, but they didn't know the half of it. It started innocently enough. Rachel came over one morning, carrying a folder of documents. She smiled too brightly. The kind of smile she used to give me as a child when she'd broken something, and didn't want me to find out. Dad, she said sweetly, I brought over some papers that need your signature, just routine things, you know, housekeeping stuff. I looked at the folder, the words property transfer agreement peeked out from the top page. My chest tightened. What kind of routine things? I asked, my voice calm. Rachel waved her hand. Oh, nothing serious, just making sure your affairs are in order. You wouldn't want Daniel or me to have to deal with a mess later, right? I leaned back in my chair and studied her face. Rachel, do you think I'm incapable of managing my own life? Her smile faltered for a moment. No, Dad, it's not like that. We're just trying to help. You're not young anymore. These things can get complicated. I glanced again at the document. It wasn't routine at all. It was a property transfer the house I lived in, signed over to both Rachel and Daniel. They hadn't even bothered to hide it. I pushed the folder back toward her. I'll think about it, I said. Rachel's jaw tightened, though she quickly masked it with another smile. Of course, Dad. Just don't wait too long. It's better to get these things sorted sooner rather than later. As she left, I watched her walk out with that same calculated calm. My daughter wasn't just careless, she was deliberate. And if she thought I was going to sign my life away, she had another thing coming. Later that evening, I found myself in the garden, pruning Margaret's roses. Claire came out with a cup of tea. She was always more subtle than Rachel, more measured with her words. Beautiful roses, she said softly. They were Margaret's pride and joy. I replied, my throat tightening. We stood in silence for a while before she said, You know, Dad, Rachel means well. She just wants to make sure you're comfortable. We all do. I looked at her carefully. Comfortable how? She hesitated. Well, managing a house assets accounts. It can be overwhelming. Maybe it's time you think about letting the younger generation help. Maybe leaving some things to them now. I stared at her, leaving. She sipped her tea, avoiding my eyes. It's not about taking from you. It's about easing your mind. You don't want to carry all that weight at your age. At my age, the words stung, though she spoke them gently. I set down the pruning shears. Claire, do you think Margaret would have wanted me to hand everything over while I was still breathing? She looked startled, but quickly composed herself. Of course not. But she would have wanted peace in the family. Sometimes holding on to too much causes conflict. I didn't respond. I just watched the roses sway in the wind, my mind racing. Even Claire, who always played the diplomat, was now part of this quiet pressure campaign. They wanted my assets, and they wanted them now. It happened on a rainy afternoon. I had gone upstairs to fetch a book when I heard voices again, this time coming from the living room. Rachel, Dad's dragging his feet. He hasn't signed anything yet. Victor, don't worry, he'll come around. He can't live forever. Daniel, stop talking like that. Rachel, oh, come on, Daniel, be realistic. Dad's sitting on assets worth millions, and he doesn't even know it. We're the ones who will be stuck with everything when he's gone. Might as well get things organized now. Victor chuckled. Besides, what's he going to do with a yacht? Fish in the middle of the ocean. The man barely leaves the house. I froze. My stomach dropped. They knew. They knew about the yacht. But how? Only my lawyer and I were aware of it. The deed was locked in my safe. Did Rachel manage to peek at something while snooping? Or had Victor dug deeper than I thought? Either way, the secret was slipping. And once they knew about the yacht, they wouldn't stop until they had it. I stepped quietly back up the stairs, my mind racing. It was time to call Mr. Harris. Time to bring the lawyer into this before my own children bled me dry. The very next morning, I called Mr. Harris, my lawyer. He'd been with our family for nearly 3 decades, a man who had attended Margaret's funeral and even my children's weddings. If anyone could be trusted, it was him. When I arrived at his office, he greeted me warmly. "You look troubled," he said, leading me to the large oak desk where countless family secrets had been managed over the years. "I overheard something," I admitted, lowering myself into the chair. "They're pushing me to sign papers. Rachel and Victor are circling like vultures, and they know about the yacht." Mr. Harris's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. That deed is sealed in your safe, and a duplicate is kept here under my lock. No one else should have access. Yet somehow they do." I muttered. They spoke about it as if it were already theirs. Mr. Harris opened a drawer and pulled out a thick file. He slid it toward me. "Perhaps it's time you remind yourself of what you truly own. You've kept most of this hidden even from your children, as your late brother instructed." I opened the file and my breath caught. The yacht was only one part of it. There were offshore accounts, stocks, a small villa in Italy I'd forgotten about, and several trust funds Margaret and I had never touched. My brother had been a wealthy man, and before his death, he'd transferred much of his estate to me with one clear request: use it wisely. Don't spoil your children until they've shown they deserve it. And here they were, trying to claw it out of my hands before I was even gone. I closed the file slowly. If they think I'm powerless, maybe it's time to let them keep thinking that. For now. Mr. Harris leaned back, a knowing smile crossing his face. "What are you planning?" I didn't answer directly. But in my mind, the plan was already forming. I stood in my study, holding the deed with trembling hands. The glossy paper bore the name of a yacht I hadn't set foot on in years, the Margaret Rose. My late brother had christened it after my wife as a final gift. I closed my eyes and let myself remember him. George had always been the bold one, the traveler, the adventurer. While I stayed back, working a steady job and raising a family, George had made millions through investments and shipping. Yet, despite his success, he remained humble. When he fell sick, he called me to his bedside. His voice was weak, but his words seared into me. "Brother, I'm leaving you more than enough, but don't let the kids waste it. Wealth without respect ruins families. Make sure they learn the value of loyalty before they ever see a cent." At the time, I thought it was unnecessary. Rachel and Daniel were still young, still sweet. I never imagined they would grow into adults who saw me as a stepping stone to wealth. Now, standing there with the yacht deed in my hands, I finally understood George's warning. The Margaret Rose wasn't just a yacht. It was my test, my weapon, and perhaps my escape. I slid the deed back into the envelope and locked it away. For now, my children would continue to believe I was vulnerable. They would push harder, reveal their true faces more clearly, and when the time was right, I'd show them everything they didn't know. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. Rachel arrived with Victor, both of them looking far too serious for a casual visit. They sat across from me in the living room, papers already in Rachel's hand. "Dad, we need to talk." She said firmly, "You've been stalling too long. It's time to sign." I leaned back in my chair. "Sign what exactly?" Victor smirked. "The transfer documents, the house, the accounts. Look, it's not like you'll need them much longer. Better to have us manage things now." My blood boiled, but I kept my tone steady. "And what if I refuse?" Rachel's expression hardened. For the first time, she dropped the fake sweetness and showed me her true face. "Then we'll have no choice but to involve legal measures." Do you really want to spend your last years fighting us in court? The audacity of her words stunned me. My own daughter, threatening me as though I were some stubborn stranger. I forced a small smile. You've thought this through, haven't you? Rachel leaned forward. Yes, Dad. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Just sign and we'll handle everything. I looked at her, at Victor's smug grin, and I realized they believed they had already won. I nodded slowly. Fine. I'll call Mr. Harris tomorrow. We'll arrange something. Rachel's face lit up in triumph. Victor slapped his knee and laughed. Knew you'd come around, old man. But inside, I wasn't surrendering. I was plotting, because the papers Rachel wanted me to sign weren't the ones Mr. Harris and I had in mind. The next family dinner wasn't a dinner at all. It was an ambush. Rachel, Victor, Daniel, and Claire all sat around the table, but the mood was tense. Papers lay stacked in the center like weapons waiting to be drawn. I felt Margaret's absence more than ever that night. She would have never allowed her children to treat me like prey. Rachel was the first to speak. Dad, we're not dragging this out anymore. It's time to make some decisions. I raised an eyebrow. Decisions about what? Victor leaned forward, smirking. About your future, about this house, about everything, really. You can't manage it all anymore. I studied their faces. Daniel's eyes darted nervously between me and Rachel, while Claire sat with her usual polite smile, sipping wine as though none of this concerned her. Rachel pushed a pen toward me. Dad, just sign the papers. We've already filled them out. It's for your own good. I picked up the document and scanned it. They hadn't even tried to hide their intentions this time. Full transfer of the house, joint control of my accounts, and even a clause about managing additional assets. My heart burned with anger, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I leaned back calmly. You really think this is for my own good? Rachel slammed her hand on the table. Yes, you're embarrassing yourself clinging to things you can't handle. You're old, Dad. You can't even plan a simple trip without causing chaos. Just let us take care of it. Her words echoed in my ears like a knife. Old, useless, embarrassment. I put the papers down slowly. All right. I said softly, if this is what you want, I'll speak with Mr. Harris tomorrow. The relief on Rachel's face was instant. Daniel exhaled as though a weight had been lifted. Victor smirked again, smug and satisfied. They thought they'd won, but in reality, they just walked straight into my plan. The following morning, I met Mr. Harris at his office again. I slid the stack of papers across the desk. They want me to sign everything over. I said. Mr. Harris flipped through the documents, his face darkening. This is blatant manipulation. They'd leave you with nothing. I nodded. Which is why we'll let them think they've won. Mr. Harris leaned back, a small smile tugging at his lips. Ah, so you want to play this the clever way? Exactly, I said. Draw up a new set of documents, ones that look identical on the surface but with no legal weight. Let them think I've given up control, when in fact everything remains under my name. Mr. Harris tapped his pen against the desk, thoughtful. I can do that, and when the time comes, I smiled faintly. When the time comes, they'll learn exactly how wrong they've been about me. 2 days later, I called Rachel and Daniel back to the house. I placed the papers on the table and signed them one by one, making a show of looking defeated. Rachel clapped her hands together, beaming. Finally, Dad, this is the right decision. You won't regret it. Victor added, now you can just relax. We'll handle everything. I forced a weak smile. Thank you, children. I'm sure you'll take good care of everything. Inside, I was seething. They thought they had stripped me of my dignity, but really they had signed away their own honor. It didn't take long. Within a week, Rachel and Victor had moved into the master bedroom of my own house, acting as though they already owned it. They brought in new furniture without asking, redecorated Margaret's sitting room, and even suggested I move into one of the guest bedrooms for convenience. Daniel, though more hesitant, went along with it. Claire whispered things like, it's only temporary, but her eyes betrayed her satisfaction. One night, I overheard Rachel on the phone laughing. Yes, it's all sorted. Dad signed everything. The house is basically ours. We're even looking into renting out part of it for extra income. Why let space go to waste? Renting out my home, Margaret's home. The house where we'd raised them, where her laughter still lingered in the walls. That was the moment I knew. They weren't just greedy. They were heartless. I retreated to my study. opened the safe once again, and pulled out the envelope with the yacht deed. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with resolve. They thought they'd won, but they had no idea the storm that was coming. The night before I left, I walked through the halls of my home slowly. Every photo on the walls, every piece of furniture Margaret had chosen, every memory, it all felt heavy. My children thought they had taken everything from me. They had no idea what I was about to take from them. I packed lightly, a few clothes, a small chest of keepsakes, and the sealed envelope with the yacht deed. Then I left a single note on the kitchen table, "Gone on a trip, don't wait up." The next morning, while Rachel and Victor slept soundly in my master bedroom, I slipped out the back door. A cab took me to the marina, where the Margaret Rose waited. Sleek, powerful, and shimmering in the sun, she was a reminder of both my brother's legacy and Margaret's love. As I stepped aboard, my heart pounded. It felt like reclaiming my youth, my dignity, my freedom. With the captain's help, we set sail. The engines roared to life, and soon the coastline disappeared behind us. For the first time in years, I breathed freely. No insults, no pressure, no one telling me I was too old. Just the sea, the wind, and the promise of peace. Back at the house, I knew chaos would soon erupt when they found the note. But that was exactly what I wanted. A week later, while I was enjoying breakfast on the yacht's deck, Mr. Harris called me. His voice carried the satisfaction of a man who had just watched justice unfold. "They came to my office today," he said. "Panicked. Rachel demanded to know why the bank still lists all accounts under your name. Victor insisted the house deed didn't go through. They were furious. I chuckled. And what did you tell them? I told them the truth." He replied calmly, "That the papers you made them believe were transfers were legally meaningless, that you still own everything, and then," he paused for effect, "I informed them about the yacht." I leaned forward, grinning. "And how did they take that?" Rachel nearly fainted. Daniel sat in silence, staring at the floor. Victor cursed under his breath. Claire looked like she'd swallowed glass. They couldn't believe you had hidden something so grand, so untouchable. $15 million floating on the ocean beyond their grasp. I laughed until my sides hurt. For once, I wasn't laughing out of bitterness but joy. Mr. Harris's tone softened. "I told them one last thing, that you had left them nothing until they learned respect. That was your condition." The satisfaction in his voice matched my own heart. My children had mocked me, disrespected me, and tried to steal from me. Now they were left with nothing but shame. 2 weeks later, I returned to the city briefly. I didn't go home. That house no longer felt like mine. Instead, I asked Mr. Harris to gather my children at his office. When I walked in, the room fell silent. Rachel's face turned red, Victor glared, Daniel looked torn, and Claire avoided my eyes. "You're alive," Rachel hissed. "Where have you been?" I smiled calmly. "On vacation. Remember, the one you said I was too old for." The words hit her like a slap. Victor leaned forward. "You tricked us. You humiliated us." I raised my eyebrows. "No, you humiliated yourselves. All I did was show you who you really are." Daniel finally spoke, his voice low. "Dad, we just wanted to help." "Help?" I snapped. "By stealing my home, by mocking me, by deciding I was finished while I still breathe." Silence fell. I stood tall, feeling stronger than I had in years. "I don't care about the money. I don't care about the house. What I care about is respect, and none of you showed it. You looked at me as a burden instead of a father. That is why you get nothing. Not now, not later." Rachel's lip trembled, but her pride kept her from crying. Victor muttered curses under his breath. Claire stayed cold and silent. Only Daniel seemed broken, guilt heavy in his eyes. I turned to leave but paused at the door. "Remember this, money can buy yachts, houses, vacations, but it cannot buy dignity. You tried to take my wealth, but in the process, you lost something greater, my trust." And with that, I walked out, the weight lifted from my shoulders. Back on the yacht days later, as the sun dipped into the ocean, I whispered to Margaret's memory. They said I was too old for vacations, but here I am, sailing free, and now they finally understand. Respect matters more than money. Respect matters more than money, and now they know it too.